Success! 2025 SEMA show is over. Our QXR R-Spec build was a complete success. We're here to give you the most in-depth look at our beautiful little project here. So obviously the most eye-catching part of the vehicle is not only the wrap, but also the body kit that we have here. But one thing that we didn't get to talk about too much through all of our interviews or at SEMA was that this was completely designed, printed, all here in-house, thanks to our friends at Aesthetic. It all started with a complete 3D scan of the outside of the vehicle. And from there, we started adding our elements and R35 inspiration.
Right, and one of the things about the modern way of doing things, back in the old days, we'd use clay, Bondo, and all this other stuff to like actually clay over the stock body and sculpt it and use that to pull molds, and that was very labor intensive and kind of slow. But this new technology with scanning and 3D printing, doing 3D renderings, we could actually present this to Nissan Infiniti and get their feedback and then do several iterations really quickly. Then we're able to reach an iteration that everybody was happy with and proceed to actually making the solid parts super fast, right?
Absolutely, and speaking of that speed, all the parts on the car, at least all the additional body panels, were 3D printed. So it all started as 3D printed plastic, and then it was reinforced with epoxy and even some fiberglass as well.
And you know, if we were to make a production version of this kit, we could actually make the bucks for the molds from these 3D printed parts. So if it was to go into production, it would be a pretty quick process.
Or even if we wanted to just sell the body kit on its own, I guess we could also do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Mike alluded to, I mean, a beautiful part about the 3D printing process is that we are able to give a lot of different iterations of the body kit. And the rear of the car, I think, just from our first iteration was like dead spot on the money. Mm-hmm. Everybody, I think, was in love with it. We were really just trying to almost have the front catch up with the rest of it. But a key element that we were trying to keep here is the functionality of everything on the car.
One of my personal pet peeves is aero kits with all kinds of gingerbread that doesn't do anything, and it's just there for looks. I mean, we tried to eliminate that from our design.
Absolutely. So maybe we'll walk you through all those elements now. We'll start with the front. There's nothing subtle about the front end of our QX80, but there are a lot of small styling cues that we've added to it to really try to marry the idea of an R35 and a QX80. Starting off with the 2026 QX80 Sport Grille. So this is a different grille than the OE piece. And another element that we added to those, you can see the bottom grille, all these line up with the strakes here of the main grille.
We added the bottom grille to get extra air into the front for the transmission and engine oil coolers.
Then another element as well from the R35 that was shared here is our daytime running lights that were included in here, and also our R35 hood scoops.
Now we've paid a lot of attention to the orientation of the scoops, so they direct air to cool the turbos just like they do in the R35.
Absolutely. So if you were to open up the hood and try to measure things up, it's exactly where the R35 would dump the air into. And another piece here, we have our brake duct.
So this takes air from a real high pressure area in the front and feeds it to the rotors. So it's pretty functional. I mean, the placement here is right where there's some of the highest pressure in the front end. That way we were able to get away with a smaller duct actually.
And then we also now we have our front splitter. So yes, there's multiple elements that we have here, but our front splitter here is what's actually gonna give us the functionality for some front downforce.
And a lot of show cars would just probably bolt this to the fascia, but we actually built an aluminum substructure under this that bolts directly to the chassis. So this is a sturdy chassis mount splitter just like you would see on the race car.
Absolutely, and APR did us the favor actually building this custom splitter, not only to the shape, but the actual width of it. It's by far the largest splitter they have ever made. You can see where they had to cut it to their main sheet and then add the additional 2 pieces because it's just a ginormous front splitter.
So one of the things, even though we redid the whole fascia, we kept all the factory sensors and everything, so all that proximity and whatever sensors for the cruise control and all that are still there.
Parking sensors, the radar. So for example, all that's housed here right about at this level. So right here is where we actually cut right along this line is where the OE bumper got cut. Everything from here below is all of our custom stuff. Everything up here up is all OE. Moving to the rear of the car, starting with our inspired by the Nissan Stagea rear wing. I really think, I mean, I know this is a polarizing element of the car, but personally, I feel this wing is perfect.
The wing, like a lot of the other elements, we kind of designed it visually so it would make the car look longer and lower and sleeker. Because this was like a pretty chunky, big, heavy looking SUV when we started.
Absolutely.
But elements like this, front fascia, the side skirts, all give a visual perspective of making the car look thinner this way, longer, and lower.
And everything is incorporated into the stock features. So the rear stock small mini wing that's back here, that's completely retained. So we have our third brake light, our rear wiper is all here, and is a completely functional rear door. If I could find a button, bam. Which will give us a little peek also at our battery relocation. And that's exactly what's under this small little box here. If we were to take this piece off, there's our
rear mounted battery.
Exactly. So
it's held down with Velcro, so it's not just flying around loose. So it's a pretty cool little addition. Totally accessible for maintenance.
And going back to the exhaust, again, basically designed to look like an R35, where we can close the rear exhaust here. And also incorporate the R-Spec badge, which is inspired by the T-Spec badge.
Right. So let's talk about the front of the car. Unlike a lot of SEMA builds, all our stuff is totally functional. It actually works. Let's start with the brakes. Now these are carbon ceramic brakes, 420 millimeter rotors. That's pretty huge. It's the same that's on the Nismo GTR. The caliper is a Brembo caliper. It's a monoblock. Monoblock calipers are stiffer. We built special brackets to adapt the caliper to the OEM knuckle. We built special hats to adapt the rotor to the QX80 hub. So this is a custom CNC machine. And we also adapted these ARP high strength longer studs to the QX80 hub. Now we did a lot of attention to detail, like we kept the OEM full floating hardware. So full floating kind of takes the thermal distortion out of the rotor. Now with a CCM rotor, that's not as big of an issue as an iron rotor, but there's a differential in thermal stress and the rotor can distort. The floating hardware kind of compensates for it. And being an OEM driven setup, you have anti-rattle clips here. So we kept all the OEM hardware to keep the refinement of it up. Now for CCM, carbon ceramic, the advantages of this over iron, the biggest advantage is it has less unsprung weight. Now it probably weighs 60% less than stock. Unsprung weight causes the suspension to work harder over bumps. When you have way less unsprung weight, the suspension can react to bumps a lot better. Another advantage for like a high-performance street car, which may seem silly, but if you've actually owned a high-performance street car with aggressive brakes, is CCM almost makes no dust. And the dust it does make is like a powdery, non-corrosive kind of dust that just literally you can just wipe it away. Now, if you've had performance iron brakes, it makes like a ton of dust, and it's usually a gross, sticky, corrosive dust that actually messes up your wheels. This makes a dust that's kind of like talcum powder, and there's hardly any of it. The final advantage is that CCM brakes last a long time. It's not unusual for a set of CCM rotors to last the life of the car and for the pads to last 100,000 miles, for instance. So that's why you see CCMs on a lot of exotics. Now we did a lot of other things. This is a big, heavy car, so we didn't want to exceed CCM's thermal limit, so we built brake ducting. This actually goes to the front end, and it takes high pressure air from a high pressure area of the front and directs it right to this bracket here, which gives the cooling air to the inside of the rotor, and it comes out the vanes. So this is a motorsports type feature, and it keeps us from overheating these brakes. There's some minor details like these braided steel lines. They use all the OEM hardware. Now, a lot of you have converted to braided steel before in your own personal builds, I'm sure. And the hardware is never exactly like stock, and you end up kind of using zip ties and a bunch of other stuff. But we used all the OEM terminations and everything with the braided steel, so it's a very clean OEM-like install. Some of the advantages to braided steel is it's very resistant to growth and stretching. So you get way better pedal feel, pedal's firmer, and also the ABS can respond better, so that you get overall better brake function. Some of the other things that we did is we had to relocate the steering rack because the VR38 is a much taller engine, and the oil pan and everything prevents us from putting the rack in the stock position. So we had to lower the rack 50 millimeters. Most builders would just go cool and just hook everything up, but we have to maintain good steering geometry and prevent bump steer. Now, 50 millimeter movement of the steering rack is all the difference between good handling and horrible, with the car like tracking all over the place and being kind of gnarly to drive, especially with a lot of horsepower. So we modified the knuckle to actually bring down the tie rods 50 millimeters. Now we're running racing type spherical bearings for the tie rod ends for less compliance. So the true amount is actually a little bit more than 50 millimeters, because we had to figure out the axis of rotation of the stock ball joint type tie rods and then subtract that difference from what the center of rotation from a spherical bearing is. So we have like the true bump steer correction here. We built a CNC machined extension for the knuckle, and a lot of builders would probably just bolt it on and use it as a spacer, but this is a heavy vehicle, big tires. We wanted to have something that was safe. So we actually put a steel sleeve down the middle to take a lot of the shear load. Then we TIG welded the extension onto the knuckle. And then we put a gusset from the extension to the knuckle body itself. So you have OEM-like rigidity, total bomb-proof under shear load connection, so it corrects the bump steer and it's safe. Now for shock absorbers, we need to get like a real performance damper in there. Like the stock thing is like airbags and all that, and it's mostly tuned for comfort. But we wanted to have something that was tuned for performance, and something that would give us a lot of adjustment flexibility if we wanted to tune the spring rates and stuff in the future. So we went to MCS and we had them custom make a set of motorsports three-way adjustable dampers. These things have remote reservoirs. You can see the reservoirs in there with external adjusters that we can get to. The high and low speed compression is in the remote reservoir. Rebound is in the main body. So what I mean by three-way is we have a high and low speed compression adjustment. High speed controls how the vehicle reacts and it hits bumps. So if you're blown through the travel when you hit a sharp bump or some kind of rut or something, we can control the high speed to make sure that the car doesn't like slam through the travel and bottom out harshly. It also helps for like initial turn-in and quick movements of the steering wheel that crispens up response. Now the low-speed compression, this is where what we call platform control comes through. So body roll and dive and squat, well, not squat in the front so much, but body roll and dive is controlled by the low-speed compression. So we can tune out a lot of body roll and excessive movement, a lot of diving under braking, and we can tune that independently of the bump response. So that gives us a lot of flexibility in dialing how this handles and the ride. Now the rebound is how the suspension responds when you hit a bump and the spring is, bouncing back. The rebound controls that. The rebound also controls, what we call transient behavior. So when you're turning the wheel one way, then the other, like you do in a slalom, the rebound controls that a lot. It also controls how you initially turn into the first half of the corner. And it also gets rid of that floatiness that you feel in a lot of luxury vehicles like this. So the MCS shock gives us a tremendous flexibility in tuning. It also has a lot of leeway in the rebound, so we can go to a stiffer spring and just adjust the shock to work with that. Once we start driving this thing and we have a better idea of what it needs. Now our spring rates are about twice of what the stock spring rates are. This is a big, heavy vehicle. And twice the amount of spring rate might sound like a lot, but if you have a good damper that can control it, the impact and ride can actually be pretty small. And we kept the proportion the same as stock from front to rear, so that way we can use the stock anti-sway bars. Now we didn't go to big sway bars because this vehicle comes with huge sway bars from the factory, and if you go too big with sway bars, you can get a lot of negative things like wheel lifting and excessive weight transfer to the loaded wheel. So we didn't want to go to much bigger sway bars than the factory. So this is about a quick view of what we did in the front. It's not just a typical slapping on there show car build. It's actually functional, and we think it's going to be a good step up of performance over the stock stuff.
Moving on to the back of the car, we'll go over some of the elements here in the rear that are much like the front, but there are some small things to point out. So we'll start with, same thing, carbon ceramic brakes in the rear. Much like the fronts, these are our custom rotor hats as well as custom rear caliper brackets. These all started from 3D prints. We had to do a few of them just to get our sizing correct, but ultimately this really is pretty cool to see how we can go from 3D scanning to then doing just slight plastic 3D printing to final product, and you're able to do that so much quickly now than before. I mean, before you'd have to make metal parts and then try to redo your designs, but now with 3D printing, that process is so much faster and so much more accurate too. Like Mike pointed out, we've retained a lot of the OE hardware to keep some of the civility of the vehicle, even though we're going to the higher performance carbon ceramic setup. Much like the front, we'll move over here to our side skirt. We also have a duct there, completely functional duct for our brake ducting. Like the front, custom rear bracket over here to actually hold the duct in place to cool off our rear rotors. As you can see also in the rear here, we used our MCS suspension. And MCS did an amazing job of using our 3D scans to create all the mounting points for the rear divorce spring and the shock over here. We kept the rear setup, the divorce setup, to keep the subtle ride. That's the way it is designed. So for example, when you have these two pieces together, there's a little bit of stiction there and you get a little bit of bind sometimes. By keeping the two moving parts separate, they're on their own natural axis, much more smoother operation. We have our remote reservoirs mounted here right on the frame rail, and the adjuster is here for the shock as well. So we have easy access to both adjusters when we need to make our changes for either high speed, low speed, and even our rebound setups. We have steel braided brake lines, as well as our custom ARP studs for the rear. At the back of the car with the showstopper part of the vehicle, I feel, which is a little quad exhaust action we got going here. Yes, it looks like a quad exhaust, but a lot of work had to go into actually making this a possibility, because it's not just tips that we welded on here, it's a true dual exhaust system.
Yeah, and there's no room under the stock vehicle to put a dual exhaust.
Indeed, not only did we have problems going over the axle, but specifically actually clearing this area so we can get our exhaust in this area, because right where this lives is the end of the frame rail, which we had to notch.
Yeah, we had to kind of chop and channel it, like especially on this side, and to make sure to maintain the body stiffness, since the mount is for the body is right back there.
It's right above it.
Yeah, we actually had to channel and box it in and everything to do a proper job of it.
So while we're back here though, we're also gonna show you guys some of the fabrication that went to this. ZSM Custom, Zach over there is the one that was in charge of doing all of this. Our custom exhaust starts right at the turbos, where we're going from a dual exhaust, merging on the passenger side, and going right to our Dynamax X-Pipe muffler. We do have our flex pipe here, and the reason it was put here, we didn't really re-engineer the wheel here, we copied the stock exhaust. This is exactly how the stock exhaust in the QX80 is routed, going from a 2 to 1 over here, and then they chose this outside passenger side pipe as the one to put the flex pipe on, so that's where we decided to put ours.
There's some cool things too, like we use V-bands instead of flanges at every junction. The V-bands allow us to drop the exhaust real quick if we need to. It's in sections, so we don't have to take the whole thing apart to remove the exhaust. Makes it easier. And we also put bungs in there for wideband sensors when we do the tuning. Another cool thing is we're running tile external wastegates, and instead of just dumping them, we're actually bringing them into the exhaust so it stays nice and quiet. So we have the flow advantage of an external wastegate, but they're nice and quiet because they're going into the
right into the exhaust stream.
System. Yep. So one of the cool things about the exhaust is we have this Dynamax muffler. It actually has an X tube inside, like a perforated core one. And what I really like about this is that V6s, if you go for a true separate dual exhaust, they kind of sound crappy. They sound like a fart. And I like to bring both banks together. And this does it in a real efficient way that also does the muffling. It's X-pipe. X-pipes tend to help your torque a little bit, help spool your turbo a little bit faster, and it gets rid of that farting noise. So this was a good way to do that all in one unit. You know, get rid of some noise and get a sweeter exhaust note.
Absolutely, and I think the exhaust note on the car is basically perfect. It's a nice little low rumble at idle. The car really wasn't that loud, even without the exhaust. When we started it up, the two turbos really do work like two mufflers and kept things pretty manageable and quiet. We were all holding our ears originally, but didn't really need to do that when we started it. But with this, we're excited to see, once we tune the car and are making our horsepower goals, what it will sound like when we have it at wide open throttle.
I think it's going to sound awesome.
Agreed, man. I think it's going to sound perfect. And then we also had to go to oval tubing to make it over this axle here.
Right. And we did the cool JDM pie cuts and all that, and it's a beautiful job. Too bad no one can see it.
Correct. It's actually one of the best looking parts of this vehicle that no one is actually able. But I guess granted that you can see the massive quad tips coming out the back. But Zach's beautiful work is a little bit hidden back here, but that's what we're here to do, to show you guys exactly what went into this build and the beautiful artistry that went into it. Another thing that gets hidden from plain sight while you're awing over the outside of the vehicle is some of the smaller upgrades we've done. So stock, the QX80 is a torque vectoring car. It comes with a completely open diff. How is that managed?
So it's a torque vectoring car. It has an open diff, and the ECU manages the brakes to kind of give vectored torque. That tends to overheat the brakes, and it's not going to play very well with 1,000 horsepower. So we put a limited slip with the E-locker. There's like some electronic solenoid stuff that actually preloads the clutches, so we can hit a switch and lock the back up. Now it doesn't turn it into a spool, but it gives it really solid limited slip action without all the weird torque distribution via brakes stuff, and I think it's a way better solution.
And a cool thing is that this is a Nissan parts bin part. So this came off of an older generation Armada, which is a complete direct fit onto the rear end of the QX80, which made installation very easy. So that's part one of our in-depth breakdown of our QX80 R-Spec build. Today, we went over some of the outer elements. Part two is going to give you the real good stuff. We're going to start talking about the engine, the drivetrain, what we did to adapt both engines, the ECU stuff. So stay tuned for that.
So if you like this content, be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, and if you want to support us, we don't make any money doing this, and we appreciate any kind of support you can give us. So go and follow the links, become a MotoIQ subscriber, and we will really appreciate that.
Tell your mom, tell your friends, tell everybody. Till next time.